And so I have the honor of introducing our third and last panelists. You can start to head up to the stage as I call your names, or actually you can go ahead and start walking up. So Irene Ruiz is works for the Idaho Organization of Resource Council. We also have, We also have Toni Stanger-McLaughlin, who's joining us on our final panel, who is working within the Office of Civil Rights at the USDA. And last but not least, I promise this is not nepotism, but this is my mama that's coming up to the stage, Mama Dorathy Barker, who is the Executive Director of Operation Spring Plant in North Carolina.
Hello, everyone. I thought I was going to be last. I've been on this field for a long time, and I said I'm going to live till I be 100, so I got a few more years to go, and I hope that this is a fight that I will see before those 100 years in, that we will all have a time to enjoy our human and our civil rights. My struggles in North Carolina is trying to keep black farmers first and foremost on their land as owners and operators, and to make sure that they have a chance to receive fair market prices for their goods, for their fruits and vegetables sold, or whatever industry that they are in. And one of the problems that we have been facing in North Carolina is that money's coming in through the state by the North Carolina Department of Agriculture. These funds only go to 2 white groups, which get 36 to 37% administration fee for all of those funds that come into the state of North Carolina. We as black groups, we have grown up to where, and we are nonprofits, we're LLCs, and we're registered with the state. Some of those funds that come into the state of North Carolina, we should be able to administer some of those funds and make sure that those farmers that want to grow fresh fruits and vegetables have a chance to grow, because the way that they drew the districts of the way that this money is to be distributed is the same political districts. And so that way, a lot of small black family farmers, BIPOC, however minority, however federal government deemed us, we are left out of those fundings, or we merely get, as my brother said, kibbles and bits. And so what I have been doing, and with land loss prevention, with the National Black Food Justice Transformation and Rural Coalition, which I am a proud member for years. I get off the board and I look and she's throwing me back on there. But I enjoy all of the contacts and the information that is shared. But I want to thank Farm Aid too before I go back to my subject. Is that years ago in the 80s, when we first started working with Farm Aid, is at the time that when we went through a family crisis and Farm Aid stepped to the table. When Farm Aid came to North Carolina and they got us to get our youth in today's agriculture, our children, to sell to the market, to know their worth and encouraging words that they gave them and that chance. But just to go and sit into Willie Nelson's RV and talk with him, and just found he is a down-to-earth human being, and he treated us like royalty, like, you know, that we weren't just a field person, that we were human beings. And I just want to thank him and his family and his organization, wherever they are. And yes, I do listen to his music, and yes, I do watch his movies. And so, getting back to one of the things that we try to do to keep families together and keep information flowing is that farmer-to-farmer network, because we need that. We need to talk about all of the things that where USDA is not funding black groups or black farmers with subsidies or whatever is out there, and we're supposed to get our fair share, we don't get it. And so that farmer-to-farmer network and other nonprofits that we are connected with, and especially the Farm Bill, how we can get our voices heard, that we can stop this generational poverty. Because we as blacks, we don't have generational wealth. And we will never achieve generational wealth if they ask us to sell fresh fruits and vegetables or put us in a program and they want to give us cotton picking prices, and that is the prices that my grandfather got for cotton years ago. We will never be able to have generational wealth. We will continue to live in poverty. And so one of the things that we are trying to do is our youth in today's agriculture, women in today's ag, because women are large landowners. And with that, we want to make sure that women, when you go out to buy land, that you know if this land will perk, what are the environmental issues, the ramifications before you acquire this land? What can you do with this land? We had one young lady that bought some land, and she was told by her neighbor what she could and could not put on her land. He would allow her to build a house, but he would not allow her to farm that land. That goes back to back then. We ain't going back. Hell no, we're not going back. So we want to try to make sure that all of these, the campaigns, and put a little advertisement on your farm to vote for this person, for congressperson, for this person, a city or county commissioner. And once they leave North Carolina, sometimes while they're in North Carolina, they want you to advocate for them, get them big crowds, fill a room. When they want that to done, who they call? Mama Dorathy. And after I have achieved that and trying to get some resources, when you can stand in a group and tell one group of people that, oh, you're asked, I can see that. But when it comes to us and we have a smaller room, we got to put a whole new proposal together. We got to have a whole line of paperwork, and nothing ever happens. Once we vote for these people, and especially if they're on the ag committee, and you don't support small black farmers, why are you there? Why do we keep them there? And some say, well, you got to vote for them so that we'll have a voice. That voice is going in this ear, but it's going out the other. So we need to stop that. We need to have wide travel, thank you, from North Carolina, and you can't get that person's ear in North Carolina. Why waste our hard-earned gas and time and renting a car or carpooling to get to Washington, D.C.? But we need to, thank you. We need to continue this fight. But more importantly, we need to try to feed ourselves. Not only the food that's going through your mouth, but we need to feed ourselves that we are worthy, we are somebody, and we have a worth.
Well, that was powerful. Thank you so much. I'm here to bring a different perspective of the work that IORC does and what we do in Idaho. So we work around farm workers, those who are the ones who grow our food, right? And farmers do, as well as farm workers. And the reason why we're working with farm workers is because they're the group of people who are seen as an invisible workforce. They're behind the scenes. A lot of people don't really see what they do. No one thinks about when they go to the grocery store, like who picked that vegetable? who canned those beans, right? So our goal at IRC is to figure out how we can support farm workers through climate change, because as we know, environmental issues affect BIPOC more largely than other groups, and we see a lot of environmental racism that happens within those groups, specifically the farm workers, and a lot of it has to do because of their immigration status, because some farm workers are undocumented, and so a lot of the times there's a lot of fear, mistreatment, they're not paid well, and also a lot of times if they don't work, they can't feed their families, and that's just the reality of being a farm worker. I'm also a former farm worker. I worked as a child from 10 till about 22, so I did that work. I know a lot of people think, oh my God, you worked as a kid, but sometimes that's what you have to do. That's how you have to support your family. We all have to work together as a family to be able to get the bills paid and get food in our mouths, right? And so a lot of the things that we do in Idaho is try to figure out how we can do a campaign around farm workers and climate change, specifically supporting them through heat, smoke, and pesticides. These are the issues that our farm workers wanted us, when we talked to them one-on-ones, wanted us to work on, because they're out there in the heat. I don't know if you know, in Idaho, we hit 100 degrees for at least 30 days this summer. So they were working in that heat every day. We also had an index of 175 for AQI for our smoke as well for a few days. This year has been really bad when it comes to forest fires. Our fires have been really bad, and farm workers are working through that, right? And so we're trying to figure out a way that we can support them and give them education, but protect them through these issues. And we don't want them to be forgotten. We want to make sure that they exist, that people know that they're here, and that if it wasn't for them, our food chains would fall apart. It literally would. I mean, I don't think a lot of people realize the work that they do, and also don't realize the effects that they have that happens to their bodies and the things they have to deal with. They don't have health insurance, they don't have PTO, they don't have sick days. And so I know right now we're not working on that. Hopefully in the future we are, because we're gonna make sure this is a long, long campaign, right? So that's kind of the goal that we wanna do. And so we also I'm from Idaho. I'm sure you've heard of Idaho in the news. Never hardly anything positive. So we have to deal with a lot of that, but also a lot of xenophobia and racism, which comes with that. We have Eagle, city of Eagle is our second big city in Idaho that just created a resolution, anti-sanctuary resolution, that says undocumented folks can't receive public funds, which they don't. And we're worried that we're going to see a lot more of that happening. We have 3 anti-immigrant bills that are going to come in our legislature next in 2025 that IORC is going to have to fight, because guess what? We're supporting those communities, so we have to be out there. And they're trying to make these laws similar to the Texas and Florida laws. And so we do have a lot of xenophobia that's really rampant there, and a lot of racism, of course. And so our goal is to fight this with the climate change issues we're working on with farm workers, because all this is intersectional. It all goes hand in hand. So we need to start realizing that all this that it works together. Another thing that we are hoping to do is be able to support our BIPOC urban farmers. We have Global Gardens, which is a refugee-owned group, a garden where we have a lot of farmers who are from refugees. And Idaho, Boise specifically, is one of the largest rehoming for refugee people in the country. And they have this beautiful garden in the city, and they grow their own food. They sell at the farmers market. They have CSAs. And we buy a lot of that food from them, because what we do is we give a lot of food boxes to farm workers too, because we want to make sure that they're also receiving nutritional food. And so that's one way we can support, urban farming as well. And I think I just want to end with a couple more things. Is we started this group called the Idaho Immigrant Resource Alliance during COVID, and the reason we started that was because we saw there was no resources in Spanish for farm workers and the Latina and Spanish-speaking community around COVID. So we created videos. We actually raised $200,000 and gave undocumented folks $500 because they didn't receive the stimulus funds. So there we go, another layer of things, right, because of their status. And then we actually ended up, now we are in our 4th season of our heat and smoke relief fund, which we get supplies like water, sunscreen, hats, coolers, and things like that to farm workers. So we're doing that right now. We're mobilizing and getting things that farm workers need, and they shouldn't have to pay out of their pockets to to get these things provided to them to protect themselves. I mean, those should be something that they're given. And another thing too is that IORC is moving towards a BIPOC-led organization. All staff members are Latina women, all organizers, and our board in November will be over half, mostly also Latina. So we're going to be the only environmental farm food group in Idaho working on these issues. So we're really excited for our new era that we're entering. And lastly is, I just want y'all to acknowledge that farm workers are farmers too. You know, I think we create distinction with that term, but they're also farmers. So we just need to recognize that as well. And I'm gonna leave you with a quote with one of the farm workers that I worked with. In 2019, he got harmed by pesticides through pesticide drift. And so the one thing he told us, I took this to legislature around, because the pilot company wanted to absolve themselves from, that they harmed someone. So we went and fought some legislation against it. This is a quote from Jose. He said, "We are human and honorable people, and all we want to do is support our families, pay our bills, and put food on our tables." So thank you so much.
Til hast esquinshootin sutechqua el sayape esquinshootin Toni Stanger-McLaughlin. Hello, and thank you for allowing me to be at my first Farm Aid and to be part of this panel here. I know you all have been sitting for a while now, and so I'm going to impart on you a gift that will lead into what I wanted to bring to this panel. So if you can, stand up, and we'll go through a little practice. So I'm going to let you listen to and dance, if you feel that you want to, a round dance song. So I come from the Colville Confederated Tribes, which the word Colville is not even a native word. It's the name of a white guy who owned a fort in Washington State. And my people are the Nahumchin people, which is the people of the water. And we have always followed the migration of the salmon from inception in Canada all the way down to California and back as one of our main food sources. But one of the things that I wanted to bring to this panel is just talking about who I am, my culture, my ancestors, in a lot of rooms, especially in the agricultural space right now, could result in me being threatened. It is such a political, divisive thing right now because of what's happened in the last administration and the emboldenment of people to exhibit historical discrimination that's been passed down through their family and now has a voice that we as minority people, as people of color, we don't even have the right to talk about who we are because now we're being labeled woke, or that we are too far liberal, we're on the left, and we're just trying to feed people. We're trying to practice our cultures, which every indigenous culture, it has a story about how they came to exist here on the land. And all those stories relate to food. And their obligation to protect the food, the animals, the ecosystems. And yet here we are now being labeled outsiders when we have our other indigenous relatives in South America that are being labeled outsiders. when we have traditionally traded amongst each other before this was America. So almost 2 years ago now, I was in the same hotel at the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. It was my first time presenting with that group, and I was talking about the Farm Bill because I've been a lawyer in the Farm Bill space for a long time now. And I walked into a room of, let's say, not people that look like me, and I felt immediately like I didn't belong. Even though the issues I advocate for are their issues. Yes. They're rural issues. I support what's good for rural America because when rural America is healthy, all of America is healthy. And it took a minute before people started to say hi to me. After I did my presentation, the person sitting next to me was Zippy Duvall, and he represents the Farm Bureau Federation, which is impartial, but they are represented largely by populations in rural spaces that sometimes don't align. Nonetheless, he reached over because my whole dialogue, my whole discussion on the Farm Bill was just off the cuff, what things I've witnessed, experiences in my travels to hear from producers directly. And he was like, wow, you know a lot about the Farm Bill. And he's like, we should really talk. And that turned into, I finally got on his agenda. We met, and my organization is the Native American Agriculture Fund. We were created out of a class action lawsuit in the first Obama administration. And that class action lawsuit began in the year I was born in 1979. And I was part of the team that helped settle it in my 30s. The leftover funding from that case is what led to the formation of a trust, which I'm responsible for overseeing, a 20-year drawdown trust fund to help reduce or eliminate the harms of the original claimants. That being said, the work that we do hasn't been invited to a lot of spaces in the agricultural world, even though we are the first farmers. And we will always be part of this land, and we should always be part of the voice in overseeing what happens to this land, regardless of ownership, because for us, there is a spiritual connection to this land. But that is where I think we can find some solutions, because what originally, when I walked into this room and did not see a lot of friendly faces, turned into a friendship with someone who I never imagined I'd become friends with, which is Zippy and his organization. We are now getting ready to sign an MOU with that organization to continue to do work. We've signed MOUs with other non-Native organizations, and really crossing that line, that was uncomfortable for me. And sometimes, especially as a minority female, especially in Idaho, you can feel threatened. My personal being, my children, I worry about us when we're in those spaces. But crossing that line over, finding commonalities, has actually gotten my organization and the advocacy I do on behalf of Native American farmers and ranchers more traction than me standing on the outside or protesting something, which there is wealth and richness in all of those spaces. But for me personally, that has then turned into fruitful relationships with NASDA, that organization. One of the resolutions that was on the books at that meeting here in the other big ballroom was in the state of South Dakota. One of their commissioners, I think their commissioner, Sarah would know, our first female Native American, our first female head of a state agriculture is Sarah Vogel, sitting here. She was the first female. So every state has either a commissioner, a secretary. They all have different names. Some of them are politically appointed, some of them are career. Sarah represented North Dakota and there's still not very many females that are state ag leaders. Okay, so nonetheless, that's really what I wanted to bring to this space is just because we're trying to advocate for our people, whether it's across the BIPOC spectrum, it doesn't make us, we shouldn't automatically be labeled one way or another. Because at the heart of our issues is what's best for our communities is going to improve the communities around you. And for Indian country, of the millions and millions of acres that we're responsible for, sometimes 50% of that is leased out to non-natives. So we do need to work together. And so I hope I bring that to this. And if you have any questions or you want to advocate and work in this space, NAF is a great partner. So the Native American Agriculture Fund, thank you.
So we're going to again transition to Q&A, and I'm going to take a little bit of privilege here as folks raise their hands to ask questions of this last panel. And as a biracial new American looking at this panel in particular, I felt a lot of pride because the way that I look at the American history and how it connects to where we are today as farmers is that the original people were growing food, growing everything, and stewarding the land, stewarding the environment, stewarding the resources in holy union with all of the non-human aspects of this land that we're on. And then groups of folks who had been landless peasants in Europe, coming from a background of many of whom were in debt, many of whom were criminalized by the people that looked like them in their native land, came to this country and saw the practices of stewarding the land. And those folks had no ability to grow anything. I don't know if that's a part of American history that's told, but the folks that arrived from Europe, they didn't know that they were arriving in a place where food was already being grown. And they looked around and they actually almost all died their first winter living in the colonies because they had no ability to provide for themselves. And one of the solutions to that issue was to import land engineers and agronomics and scientists and magicians from the continent of Africa. And those people were used, their bodies were used and abused. And in all of the ways in which the land had been respected and regarded over time, a part of creating a new story about what America would be meant that those people would not be considered humans, the groups that are represented on this very stage. And I think that when you think about the American story in that way, it kind of explains why our original laws, our original case law, create this feeling of urgency. So I like to call time a colonial construct because I think there's so many ways in which we feel so much urgency before this presidential election. And we have this manufactured sense of, well, why are these immigrants coming over here eating our cats and dogs? You know, my grandmother, my family is half Black Jamaican, half Chinese Jamaican. My grandmother's family immigrated to Jamaica from Hong Kong, and when she was walking home from school as a child, they would taunt her and say, China Nyam dog, China Nyam dog. And I don't know if you all know that, like, when I came to this country in the 80s, Haitian Americans were being told that they ate animals and dogs. And as a Jamaican, I was told not to really talk much about being Jamaican, not really to like have much pride in being Jamaican and to try to assimilate and working in some of those ways, cleaning hotel rooms. As a child, just that being like the path to the American dream. And so I share that as I was listening to these powerful, beautiful women sharing that story because we have been placed a very big burden upon us, and that is that this idea of the ways in which our laws work to other, exclude, ostracize, and only if we feel like it, to recognize the humanity in other people, that's what we've inherited. That's the legacy that has been placed on our shoulders. And I put my jacket on because I got paranoid y'all were looking at my shoulders. But the weight of the laws that we have on our shoulders tells a story of other. It tells a story of why am I not getting my needs met when right over there someone else is getting their needs met. And then we come together and we start trading stories, and we're hearing time and time again. We've heard a white farmer come up here, we've heard a white lawyer come up here, we've heard folks from different communities telling us that we're not getting what we need, right? We as this era of America is not getting what we need. And so I see that as like such a cool thing that we're all in this room together right now, that in the same way that those laws were drafted out of fear to give basis to terrorize and terrify and commit genocide and atrocity against the original peoples and our land, our trees, all of the things that restore all of our health and humanity, we have this opportunity to use some of those same pretty boring things, laws, to make a new future for this country, to tell a new story of what this country can be. And yes, it's going to take a really long time, right? Because that is something that is upon us. The reality of taking away regulations on corporations so that our land can be completely abused, so that our environment can become uninhabitable, unproductive for our farmers. Laws have created those conditions. And we have the power in this room amongst us all to see ourselves in that writing of the future of the American story. And so I'm really excited about that, and I hope you all are too. And I know there are questions, so let's have some folks ask their questions.
So this is for Irene. You mentioned how you were working in assisting farm workers in getting the supplies that they need in order to be more safe in the field. I was wondering what work your organization does to discuss with the landowners and the farmers what needs to be provided to farm workers. Speaking from experience in Florida, there were many farm workers who were provided protective safety glasses for picking oranges, and then it turned out that those safety glasses fogged up in 2 seconds and they couldn't do their job. So I'm wondering, you know, what discussions and what work are you doing in order to pave that way?
Yeah, we have volunteers right now, and some of them have been talking to farm owners, and some of them don't want to talk to us at all. We have a lot of landowners who are just like, we don't want to talk to you. Also, we don't want you to give them supplies because I don't know what you're going to indoctrinate them with. And that's the sad reality. But then we also have some other landowners who are like, yeah, let's discuss some things. How can we support? How can we help? And so our campaign that we're doing with Heat and Smoke, my goal is to go out there and start talking to more landowners and see how we can work together. Because I think it's important for us to work with each other in order to get things done. And we're hoping to get a policy for mandated, because the farm workers want breaks. They don't get breaks in Idaho for the farm work. And so we're going to try to get a policy going for mandated breaks. And we're going to need landowners to help us with that, because without them, it's going to be hard. It's already hard to do a lot of things in Idaho, specifically when it comes to money, specifically when, you know, it comes to, you want to give farm workers breaks. Why? Like, because less production, right? And less money for them. And as you know, like, a lot of farm workers are seen as commodities, they're not seen as human beings. So we really need to start, we're going to try to foster more of those relationships with landowners, because we know if we want to win this policy, we have to work with them.
Hi. I hope I can control my emotions. Stanger, thank you. Thank you for your words. I'm here as a harvester with NAMA. I'm a fisherman. I fish for wild sockeye salmon in Bristol Bay. I get to experience the miracle of not having the upfront work of producing, growing the salmon. The salmon grow themselves in the ocean. And I get to be there for the miracle of their return. And I really appreciated what you had to say about, your shift from feeling like you are being viewed as a threat, and then helping people understand that you're in this together. And if your people are fed and taken care of, that is a sign that everything is good for everybody. And that's something that I've been trying to get across to people. Because Bristol Bay has been enjoying some really good record runs and returns of wild salmon. But unfortunately, the salmon are not returning to other rivers in Alaska, the Yukon and Kuskokwim rivers, and it's really disrupting the cultures of the people in those places, in the upriver communities and coastal communities. And so I'm the organization that I'm on the NAMA board, but the organization that I work with works to ensure that wild salmon will thrive far into the future. And but there's something happening in the ocean, and we believe that a lot of it has to do with the factory ships in the Bering Sea, and the bycatch, and how the runs have been diminished. And we're dealing with all kinds of issues that have been discussed today. Corporate consolidation, Tyson and Trident Seafoods, basically being, a corporate consolidation. So, but anyways, I'm just trying to sort of flag some things for everybody, and hopefully we can connect in really important and potent ways to address all of these things that pertain to food and how we feed people and how we live dignified lives, and work together to make sure that everybody has dignity. And somehow we need to make fish cutting cool too, because sadly, all of the processing work is going overseas, and then the product is being re-imported and recognized as a trade deficit. And so that the Domestic Seafood Production Act is something that we all need to be kind of keeping our eyes on. But thank you. Thank you so much. I'm appreciating everything that's happening here so greatly.
Well, one of the things to let everyone know, so NAF is a funding organization. For our 20-year existence, and we're in year 5, we make grants, and our grants go to 501c3s, state tribes, and federally recognized tribes, CDFIs, which are essentially small banks that often exist in credit deserts, and educational institutions, which could be a elementary school or a university. We've funded projects in New York, in Connecticut, in Alaska, Idaho. We're in 27 different states, and our funding cycle launches on March 1st. We've included broadly agriculture. So if you have a project that we've funded FLAG, we funded advocacy work, but if you think of a project that could align and support a tribal community, as long as it's going to support a Native American farming and ranching community or harvesting community, then you can apply for our funding. So that being said, we also do a lot in this broader advocacy space with the Native Farm Bill Coalition, Indigenous Food and Ag Initiative. But one of the things as it relates to seafood is we have a vision document on our website called Reimagining Native Food Economies, and this was brought up earlier, is we need to treat agriculture like we treat bonds for road construction, for education. And it needs to be thought of in that way on the state and federal level. And our current FSA director is a tribal member, Zach Ducheneau, Farm Service Agency, and first Native American to sit in that seat, but also a producer. And one of the things that he said, and forgive my language, but he said, we need more people, and we were in the Witten building at USDA, with shit on their boots. And we really do. And right now we have that at USDA more than we've ever had it before. And that's a testament to this administration, which I don't want to lose that traction, because we also have, you look at our assistant secretary or deputy undersecretaries of all these different agencies, chiefs, and it's the first time we've had a lot of diversity. RMA's been brought up, risk management and disaster assistance and insurance. For the first time, we have an operator from South Dakota that's the administrator of that agency. She came from a farm and ranch. She understands the issues from that perspective. So that being said, our reimagining native food economies is about hubs, sub-hubs, and spokes and wheels to connect rural America to infrastructure and supply chains, processing plants, to look at it from you could be an individual producer or part of a cooperative, but the bulk of the infrastructure needed to be successful would be communal, but still have an opportunity for businesses and corporations to exist. So I encourage you to look at that. But one of the things that I just want to let everyone know is that if you have a project that aligns with NAF, apply for funding. We're going to launch our next funding cycle on March 1st. But also, if you need a partner in this space, reach out to us. If you want, we also fund in Hawaii. But one of the things that I just really want everyone to encourage you to think about today is the progress that I personally have seen in this administration. I don't want to lose that traction, but think about having more of yourselves in those offices and county commissions to serve in spaces where you're either an advisor, but hopefully you have a voting seat, and understand how to get elected in those spaces, because you have to get off the bench. You have to be in the game to make real change. And as far as fishing is concerned, in Seattle, one of the things that we've said is a lot of the tribes' seafood and salmon is one of our sacred foods. But we have a port, and there's issues with pollution in that port. Well, get on the Port Authority, because when we're protesting with a sign, nobody's listening. When we go to court, we keep losing. But if we can get people elected to serve on those types of commissions and councils, then we have the voting authority to change the direction of how those businesses operate.
Thank you so much. We're right at time, and that's actually another round of applause for our final panel. Thank you very, very much. And that was actually the perfect segue into our speaker. It's almost like someone planned it to go that way. But yeah, very, very important to get in the game. We really, really need folks in this room to be willing to be in all of the rooms. We need eyes and ears in all of the decision-making seats. And we know that we can do so many things if we're all working together and making sure that we're in all the rooms where these things are being discussed.